Hello everybody. We're here today to talk with our newest author, Father Leontios, who is a monk in Cyprus and who is the author of this book, which has just arrived from the printer, if I can find my camera angle correctly, which is called Christian Orthodox Political Philosophy, a Theological Approach. And the very first thing an observant person might notice that the name on the book is slightly different, and that's because that's Father Leontios' name in the world. So, having said that, Father Leontios, hello, good morning, good evening, as the case may be. Nice to
hello, Nicholas. Good evening.
Nice to speak to you again. Can we kick off by just tell us as much about yourself as is appropriate, which might also help us to understand the context in which you came to write the book.
Yes, I'm a monk, as you said, in Cyprus, in Limassol, at the Metropolis of Limassol. I was born in 1974, and I became a monk quite late in life, in 2018. I come from a legal background. My father was a lawyer, and I also studied and practiced law for around 12 years. But then I decided that life is too short to be that you have to follow what you really desire, what your heart desires. And that's why I decided to become a monk here in Limassol.
And could you say just a little bit more about how do you experience that desire that leads to embracing monasticism?
Well, it was a gradual process, and of course it derives from faith in God. But I believe that I should have been more decisive and become a monk much earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to live as a monk, let's say, all stages of your adult life. It's better. Mm-hmm. But as they say, it's better late than never.
Mm-hmm. That's good. So you're a monk in Cyprus, which, as many people will know and probably hear in my voice, I'm British. So perhaps Cyprus is more familiar to me as somebody who's lived in Great Britain, where there's a very big population of Greek Cypriots. But people in America, Cyprus is perhaps not so familiar. So can you just tell us a little bit about a very quick potted history of Cyprus? And even the year of your birth strikes me as an important date in Cypriot history.
Yes, exactly. It was the date of Turkish invasion of Cyprus. Northern part of Cyprus is still under occupation. Well, Cyprus is an island with very big history from ancient times, and it's one of the first nations which became Christian. Christianity was introduced here from the apostles, from the age of the apostles, and from Apostle Paul and Barnabas, and it's one of the most ancient churches. It was the first to become autokephalos in 431 AD, with on the basis of the decision of the Third Ecumenical Synod. And the Archbishop of Cyprus has three imperial privileges of holding imperial spectre, signing with the red ink, and wearing a purple imperial mantle. Mm-hmm. These are privileges that were given directly by the emperor of the Roman Empire, Zenon. Mm-hmm. And due to its very, very strategic position in the Mediterranean, at the crossroads of many civilizations, due to the fact that it's a small island, it has always been, throughout its history, it has faced many difficulties and occupations. But thankfully, with God's help, we have retained what is most important, which is the Christian faith, the Christian Orthodox faith.
Is a high percentage of the population still baptized in the church?
Yes, I would say 100% of the Greek Cypriots. Unfortunately, we do not live together with the Turkish Cypriots because after the Turkish invasion of Cyprus in 1974, they have carried out a policy of ethnic cleansing, and the Greek Cypriots have moved to the south, and Turkish Cypriots have moved to the north.
Mm-hmm.
These Turkish Cypriots are Cypriots. They are our brothers, and they were in fact a Muslim community which came into history due to the Ottoman conquest of Cyprus. But gradually, during the end of the British rule, they started to acquire a national consciousness, which gave rise to certain demands, which they received certain privileges in the Constitution of Cyprus of 1960, which unfortunately created a non-functional constitution, which when President Makarios tried to reform it, there was a reaction by the Turkish Cypriots. They started living, there was like a revolt by them. Some of them started living in enclaves. And in 1974, after a coup which was carried out by the Greek dictatorial government then, probably in coordination with the Turkish government, because they were both NATO members. There was an invasion of Cyprus, and the Turkish army occupied and still occupies 40% of the land area of Cyprus. And now there have been ongoing negotiations to reach a settlement, but without success.
Yes, and you mentioned then in passing President Makarios, who's the first president of the independent Cyprus, and he's somebody who's mentioned fairly early on in your book, and also perhaps you could say a little bit about him, because obviously he's more than simply a political figure, and just very, very briefly sketch a picture of, given that you're writing about political philosophy from the background of somebody living in Cyprus, something about the political situation in Cyprus. Is it like many other countries in the West where there are two main parties, one of the left and the right, that kind of thing?
Today, yes. At the time of Makarios, no, because we had just gained independence. By tradition, the leader of the Greek Cypriots was the Archbishop during the Ottoman Empire, and this continued afterwards also during British colonial rule. So it was natural that the first leader of the Republic would be the Archbishop. And of course, he had a role in the anti-colonial struggle as a spiritual leader. He wasn't really in favor of an armed revolt, but in a way, facts on the ground forced forced him in a way to support the struggle, but he was always keen on negotiations to find a solution. Of course, the aim was union with Greece, but when he realized that Britain and Turkey would not accept this, and when he realized that the partition of the island was a real danger and prospect, he decided to compromise and create and allow the creation of an independent Cypriot state, but with the constitutional problems that I described before, that it was a bicommunal constitution. The president was, by the constitution, Greek Cypriot, and the vice president, Turkish Cypriot. There was division of powers on all levels of government, executive, judicial, parliamentary. And the vice president had also very, very wide veto powers. This created problems of functionality of the constitution. So when in 1963 President and Archbishop Macarius tried to reform the constitution, Turkey reacted aggressively, and then it was the first, let's say, taste of bicommunal problems and conflict in 1963. From 1963, officially, we have the Cyprus problem before the United Nations organization. Negotiations started from 1963. But then the island was, let's say, practically under control of the Greek Cypriots. In 1974, due to the coup carried out by Greece, which was, they were acting in a way contrary to Greek national interests by trying to remove Macarius. This was a pretext for Turkey to invade as a constitutional guarantor of the island, and with the pretext of protecting the Turkish Cypriot community. After the coup d'etat, the dictatorship in Greece collapsed, and from then it's governed by democratic governments.
Mm-hmm. And today in Cyprus, you have two or more major political parties?
Yes, I would say two big parties on the center, on the right and the left, and one smaller party in the center, and another one even smaller in the center left. The current president came, let's say, from the background of the right wing party, but he was like a rebel candidate for them, and he was supported by the center parties.
That's interesting.
So yeah, and it's of course a presidential democracy. It's not parliamentary. So for the parliamentary membership, there are different elections, parliamentary elections.
And the church in Cyprus also has this, I think, unique situation that you have a kind of direct election for the archbishop. Is that not true?
Yes, we had elections recently. According to the constitution of the church, the people elect their favorite candidate, and then the synod has the power to elect anyone among the first three.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not exactly very democratic in the sense that it's not direct
No.
election by the people.
And has that been the practice for centuries, or any idea?
No, before it was more direct. It was just by the people, and the synod just confirmed the election. Now they don't only confirm, but they elect among the first three.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you've written a book about Christian Orthodox political philosophy. Why did you think to do this? Tell us a little bit about how this book came together, and I believe it was published first in Greek also.
Yes, because I always felt that Orthodoxy is part of our identity. Of course, it's not just a religion, it's a civilization. Of course, Christ is at the head of our church, and the kingdom of Christ is not of this world, but of course, it is a source of inspiration for all aspects of life. So it always struck me that people believe that church should not be involved in politics. I mean, that's the basic, I think it's the most prevalent view. But I think the church has a role as to inspire political leaders. They shouldn't be involved directly in power. I mean, to have positions of power, because that would constitute secularization. But of course, we shouldn't think in boxes that now I'm thinking religiously, now I'm thinking politically. What is the connection between the two? I think that's a very self-defeating way to think, and I think that our politicians should draw inspiration from the Orthodox Church and Orthodox history, which is 2,000 years old, whereas the Cyprus Republic is only from 1960, 60 years old. So we need our politicians need to be inspired by the Church and Orthodox faith.
And can you give an example of either something where you would say that has already happened, or perhaps where it could happen?
Well, fundamentally, we belong Cyprus and Greece, for example, as well as other Orthodox states, belong to NATO. Not Cyprus, no, of course, but Greece, yes. This is an organization which is in conflict with Russia, which is the greatest Orthodox state. So in this sense, it's like a very, very serious distortion. I mean, I don't see how an Orthodox thinking politician would say, fine, why not? Let's say we participate in NATO. We also send weapons to NATO or Ukraine to fight the Russians. I think it's a serious distortion.
And Cyprus, you said, is not a member.
Cyprus, it's a member of the European Union, but not of NATO.
And has there ever been debate in Cyprus about joining NATO? And
yes, sometimes this idea is promoted by certain politicians during elections. And sadly, I mean, the reaction of most people, well, quite strangely, who objects to this? The Communist Party, which is the most, let's say, atheist, non-Orthodox. So that is what I mean. There are some distortions and not logical illogicalities, let's say, in our political system.
But in terms of what made you write the book, I think somewhere fairly early on in the book you mention a particular situation where a number, maybe quite a large number of the Orthodox clergy in Cyprus were getting involved in a particular political cause. Am I remembering that correctly? And can you say a bit more about the background there?
I think, yes, not that they're involved directly in politics, but there is a general view that, Orthodox clergy, Greek flag, nationalism, there is like in a way, nationalism, which is an ideology, starts to distort, or, let's say, orthodoxy, or becomes like a package which has an ideological, let's say, character. Orthodoxy goes together with nationalism, let's say, and I think this is this is a mistake, because all ideologies are, in a way, potentially dangerous. Potentially, they can become idols of this world. So an Orthodox person must be very careful not to identify with ideologies and lose his freedom of thought in this way. I think ideologies should just be used as instruments or ways to describe certain political views. They should be descriptive and not prescriptive of our way of thinking. So if something very, very common is for, let's say, an Orthodox cleric, a Greek Cypriot cleric, to say, I'm a right wing, I think that's wrong to identify with an ideology. It's a form of secularization.
And that would be true whether they're identifying with right or left.
Yes, but the main danger is right. Yes, it's more rare to identify. Well, they might have some, let's say, left-wing views, but they will not identify and state, I am left-wing.
Yeah, perhaps some Orthodox clergy at certain times in history in certain places may have done that, but I would agree. I think if one could say as a very, very big generalization of the entire Orthodox world and history, that the temptation to identify with the right is probably the bigger one.
Yes, I agree.
So I think you may have, in a way, you've touched on this already, but what would you say is the central thesis of the book?
The central thesis is that Orthodox Christianity must be an inspiration for politics, for politicians, both in terms of local politics and international politics.
Okay. And one person who again you mentioned, and I know you are a monk with there in Limassol, is Metropolitan Athanasius of Limassol, who I think is probably very well known to many in the Orthodox community in America because of a book called The Mountain of Silence, where he is, I think,
yes,
a discussant with the author but perhaps people haven't made that connection. And you say that he, in many ways, is an inspiration for you could you say a little bit more about the ways in which Metropolitan Athanasius has inspired and affected your life and your thought?
Well, yes, I started going to his homilies when I was, I think, around 30 years old, and from then I started attending his homilies, and what impressed me most, what convinced me, let's say, that I should proceed in greater depth into our faith was his love, the way that he his whole speech and his whole behavior showed that he was a very loving person, and also humble. So then I started to realize that living without humility and love is very dangerous. It's you will waste your life, this life, and maybe eternal life. That life is not worth living if you don't live in a Christian way, which is in humility and in love.
Mm-hmm. I think that in terms of relating that to political philosophy and to politics, it's hard to imagine how you could be a politician, certainly in the societies I'm familiar with, and be in any way an icon of humility. Particularly, love is perhaps harder to pin down, but I'm not sure how that that plays into, I think, to a wider problem we have in the world now with the internet, and that we are so many, even within the church, there seems to be a kind of a tendency towards self-promotion, and you can argue, you can justify it on the basis that I have to promote myself because I think I have something to say, and if I want people to listen to me, I have to promote myself, which I imagine is probably what a politician is thinking.
Yes, but okay, defining humility and trying to apply humility in everyday life is not easy, and but I think humility doesn't have a specific way of manifesting itself. I don't think, like Saint Paisius said, that for example, the aim of spiritual life is to become a saint, to acquire the Holy Spirit. It doesn't mean that the Holy Spirit manifests itself in the same way for all people. So a politician can be a saintly politician, but he's still a politician. And sometimes to lead requires humility, because you are exposing yourself to criticism and or to even to humiliation. So it needs discernment sometimes to realize who is humble and not. But it should be the guiding principle for all people, especially Christians.
And with going back again to Metropolitan Athanasius, is there anything specifically in his teaching or writings that come out very strongly in your book, you would say?
Regarding the unity of Orthodox Church, that it prevails, overrides national divisions. There should be union and communion, and that's quite often it comes out from his speeches when he refers to saints from other national backgrounds.
And that really brings us on to another point, which is that your book does go into questions of interorthodox relations.
Yes.
And as I've said to you, it seems to me that we are, I mean, I have been Orthodox for 40 years almost, and perhaps this is the lowest point I have ever known in terms of interorthodox relations.
Yes.
So what does your book say about this? And beyond the time you wrote the book, how do we move not only to if you like to break down misunderstandings, but also to, I think, to assent to come to oneness of mind regarding what the truth of different situations is. We can't simply agree to be together on the basis of we should be together, but if we hold fundamentally different views of I mean, is there I'm waffling here. Is there a dogmatic problem behind some of the disputes we're now having, perhaps?
Fortunately, it's not. It doesn't appear to be dogmatic. It's appears to be. It's very serious, of course, but perhaps it's not dogmatic. It appears to be a problem, jurisdictional issue, but as this conflict shows, it has a very, very deep meaning, and we are now on the verge of a nuclear disaster even, and maybe this is not unrelated to the fact that there is now like an unofficial schism within Orthodoxy, which it appears that there's a deadlock regarding its possible resolution. So, of course, we cannot say let's wait until the end of the war and maybe the war will solve it. I don't think this is acceptable, because killing between war is a very grave sin, and humanity should avoid it at all costs. And especially this war might lead to a nuclear conflict. So how to proceed forward? Let's say this is like a trap from the devil. It can only be solved by our humility from both sides. But it's such a hot situation that it's difficult to directly deal with it. I think that our church leaders, and maybe they should invite leaders from other faiths to ask the international, let's say, centers of decision making that we need a multipolar new world order to avoid a nuclear war. Because I think this is the key for peace. It was, let's say, the key for relative peace after the Second World War. And I think multipolarity is better than unipolarity, especially as we can see from the experience of the last 30 years when we can say the collective West at the time when humanity was realistically looking forward to an era of peace, they unfortunately took advantage of their position of power and started engaging in many wars with many, of course, millions of victims in their effort to solidify their position and become, let's say, masters of the world. Instinctively, that's of course wrong, especially if you want to acquire, if you want to reach this goal through violent means. Of course, this is unacceptable. If you can acquire it using soft power, that's more acceptable. But experience showed that there was a use of military power after the fall of the Soviet Union to create a unipolar world. So I think religious leaders and especially Orthodox leaders within a synod should, let's say, in a way, deal indirectly with the Ukrainian conflict by saying, let's have a multipolar world of let's say balance, international balance.
But isn't that also perhaps the issue in the church, that it's been perhaps too much a question of, putting it crudely, Greeks versus Russians, and of course there are others. There are Arabs, there are Romanians, there are Slovakians, etc., Poles, etc., who are Orthodox. That we need some way of coming together that is not simply based on numbers, if you like, present numbers or past history, but simply so that all the voices can be heard, and we can, if you like, mimicking the Council of Jerusalem in the early days, and that they come to some understanding of what is the mind of God for His church.
Yes, exactly. Yes, I agree fully that it's a distortion to have, let's say, a kind of diarchy within Orthodoxy, and I think the people are more inclined to be in communion with each other. But perhaps this is not evident, and this doesn't come through due to the antagonism which has come across, and especially recently. I think the Greeks should acknowledge that Russia is the most powerful Orthodox nation, and the freest from, let's say, Western influence, which is not per se bad, but if it's hostile to Orthodoxy, Western influence, then if we are speaking about this kind of influence, then Russia is the most free from this influence. And it's the country which upholds Orthodoxy as a part of its identity more clearly. Of course, someone might say, oh, that's just a front, they're just using it. But okay, one could answer back, if it's just a front, then why don't you do it as well? But they are in this, let's say, conflict with the West, which I believe that Russia is on the defensive. this requires great, let's say, sacrifice and courage to confront the West, and this should be acknowledged. But on the other hand, Russia should acknowledge that the ecumenical patriarchate has much greater seniority, maybe 1,000 years, and that it would constitute secularization to make an equation. Political power, that means we should be first. Of course, they're not saying it. They're not saying this, but it shouldn't become, let's say, indirectly a part of their narrative, let's say.
Mm-hmm. So, to the time of our conversation is coming to an end, and just want to ask one other question. A friend mentioned to me that the metropolis of Limassol, in which you're sitting, has quite an active social work in society there, and I wonder if you could say a little bit about that, and if that in any way informed what you've written in this book.
Yes, we have social organization, which I'm also working in, because another degree that I have studied is social work, and I am working in this social providence organization within the metropolis, where there are employed psychologists, social workers, and they try to attend to, apart from the spiritual needs of the people, the social needs and the material needs, and either with advice or with material help, or with money, or with giving food every day. Currently, we are offering food to around 2,000 people a day.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them are students.
Gosh.
So our Metropolitan believes that the spiritual, of course, role of the church is overriding and most important, but it should be like a source of inspiration for also social work.
Mm-hmm. And is that something you touch on in your book?
Yes, because political and social policy are intertwined, and the church should not identify with any ideology, but should try to use the certain positive aspects of ideologies, from various ideologies, like and from the socialist ideology, although by no means should not identify with it, but should recognize some positive aspects of it, and use it in its effort to make the life of its people better, irrespective whether they belong to the Orthodox Church or not, irrespective of nationality or faith.
Mm-hmm. Yes, love without precondition.
Yes, of course.
So, Father Leontios, thank you very much for spending some time with us today. Just to repeat what I think I said at the beginning, the book we've been talking about, which Father Leontios has written, is called Christian Orthodox Political Philosophy, a Theological Approach. And the name on the cover is actually Pavlos Kyprianou, which is Father Leontios' name in the world. And the book is now in print and formally being published actually at the beginning of August, but at the moment gradually making its way out to people like Amazon, who I know many people buy their books from. So the book should be available in many, many places now to be ordered, and will be with you soon should you order it. So thank you again, and I hope to look forward to perhaps speaking with you again in the future.
Thank you very much. God bless you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.